All right, time to get beautiful.
That's the way to kick us off.
It's time to just take a sip of that mocktail or cocktail or no-tail because things are about to get a little bit spicy. This is Ella.
Hi everyone, this is Ozzy, and today we have a special guest.
Hi everyone, this is David.
We have David on the show. Is this a show? Podcast.
Yeah, we're a mess already.
And let's just be clear, not everybody has had alcohol yet.
And that's a great segue into what are we drinking? So, I myself am drinking a homemade kombucha, which you all have heard me drink before. Ozzy.
I'm having homemade water.
Ooh, that looks fresh in a wine glass.
And then thanks to Elam, I'm having some vermouth on ice.
Yes.
So first time.
Love it. Well, cheers.
Cheers. How's the vermouth?
It's delicious. It's quite sweet. I had never had it like that. It's actually
Like just
good.
on ice.
Just on ice, it's good.
Nice.
I think I'm going to do this more often.
Okay. Introducing new drinks. I love it on the show. For today's topic, we have something good considering it is Father's Day that just passed. And so our theme for today is relationships with parents. We wanted to kind of keep it open-ended. Because not everyone has the luxury of having both parents, right? Sometimes. So I think that's how we'll focus our conversation today. With that, how do you celebrate Father's Day, Mother's Day, Parents' Day in general? Who wants to kick us off?
Well, I'll start off by saying Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there.
Aww.
First of all, sending the love your way. But Father's Day to me growing up was interesting. I think it's a traditional, what, you normally see in the media, like, commercials, buy your dad this, buy your dad that.
Right.
It's Father's Day, a day to celebrate dads. So as a kid growing up, for me, it was just kind of like a normal tradition that you do in American culture, or maybe in any culture at that point, where you're just a day to celebrate dads.
Yeah.
As I've gotten older, that's changed simply because as you get older, you come to understanding of certain emotions that you have with the relationships with your parents, becomes a little bit different to gather, because do you celebrate somebody that's been, there in your life, or someone that perhaps hasn't been there in your life, right? So for me, how do I celebrate Father's Day? Honestly, normally it's like a card, like, hey dad, happy Father's Day, and here's a gift or something, right? Here's some cash. But a lot of it has come down to it, at least for me, it's just a gesture of like, hey, thank you for being dad. And, without getting too much into the rest of it, which I'm sure we'll get into in just a little bit. But that's the way that I see Father's Day. For me, it's just kind of like something that I grew up getting used to. Get my dad a card, happy Father's Day, sending a text message, something like that. But at least that's what it's like to me right now, where I'm at in my life.
Nice.
What about you, Ozzy?
Me, Father's Day, how do I celebrate? Well, I don't know. Well, yesterday, for example, right, my dad actually worked on Father's Day.
Oh.
So it was more of and I don't have a car, so I was like, how am I gonna get into it was more of this figure out the logistics around his work schedule. So it wasn't like there wasn't a thing, or nothing was planned, right, to commemorate Father's Day. And I don't think it's a big deal not to celebrate Father's Day. I mean, if anything, I called my father in the morning. I was like, hey, we chatted it up. I was like, happy Father's Day.
Right.
We talked, we chatted, and I think as a child, I think I did my job of like acknowledging it's your day
It's
here.
your day, yeah.
Then I don't know, something that did kind of make me think whether or not I'm a good child or not was the fact someone asked me what I'm getting my father for Father's Day. I was like, nothing. What do you mean? He decided to get my mom pregnant to have me. Like, why am I giving you a gift? Give me a gift. But also, and then another thought of me was like, well, there's a El Día del Niño, or like there's a day, it's a child's day, right?
I see.
It's a kid day.
Yeah.
I was never celebrated for being a kid. So I'm like, no, I'm just being petty.
Yeah, I was like, that seems a little quick 12 here.
But that's how I was raised. That's how they taught me. You're not
Right.
gonna celebrate Child's Day. Why am I gonna celebrate Father's Day? You
Right.
know, like
Why make it special?
Why make it special if you're not gonna make me feel special? That's one point that came to mind.
Yeah.
Another point that did also come to mind. I used to write my parents like homemade cards, right?
Yeah.
Maybe for Father's Day, Mother's Day, or like Christmas, the holidays. My cards always ended up at the garbage.
Sore spot.
So as a kid, seeing that my gifts weren't appreciated, I was like, well, I guess it's not that big of a deal not to celebrate
Yeah.
it. You know, my parents never made it a big deal to celebrate it in the first place. I'm sure I imagine it must be nice as a father or mother to like
get
be
an
acknowledged or
appreciation, yeah.
appreciated. But I wasn't raised like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just what's that saying? Lo que siembras cosechas,
What you plant, or I don't know.
what you sow, you.
One of those things.
Anyway, I'm really bad at these things. But
Okay.
yeah, like, you know, my
I know
parents
you
never.
you make half of the sayings if anything.
The ones in English, I do make them up.
I take it in my conversations and I start using them.
Yeah.
People are like, what? What'd she say?
But
Sorry.
you reap what you sow.
There you
I
go.
see. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that I've heard.
It's like cool. Like it was never instilled in me to like celebrate these holidays. Maybe because my mom, in a sense, was also very practical.
Yeah.
And she's always been like, why are you gonna buy me flowers? They're so expensive. Do something else with your money.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a good perspective, but me personally, buy me flowers. Like, I want flowers. I know they're expensive. But anyways, that's my perspective
I
on
see.
Father's Day.
I see. So I have a question for you before I go into mine. So like,
Yeah.
we're all in our 30s.
Yeah.
We all probably have a perspective around having a kid or two in the future. So if we were to flip, and you are the men, you're like the boys in this conversation.
Okay.
So we're talking about Father's Day. If you had a child, and then the child also kind of like did the same thing in return, what would your stance be? Because like you felt this way, and granted, it's gonna be a little bit different when you're in that position. But I guess I'm curious, like, yeah, like I don't know. Do you think you will feel the same exact way as your parents do, or would you be like, no, get me, celebrate me, like I want to be appreciated type of situation?
I'll make it a quick answer just so that we don't take too much time, but I think that I would want to be celebrated, and that just comes to me wanting to be a better father than mine was, for example, right? Not to say that my dad was a bad one, but I'd want to improve or just be better at it, and know that this other human being that I raised is appreciative of like the environment that they grew up in, and
Right.
like where they loved and things like that.
I see. What about you?
Would I get butthurt?
I think that's another way to ask the question. Yeah. Would you get butthurt?
If I get no call from said child,
Yeah.
like no zero and no acknowledgement,
That child.
then I will be kind of upset about it. But if they give me a call, something that simple, like, hey, happy Father's Day, I'm like, perfect, that's all I need.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't have to be over orchestrated. Like, you don't have to
It's
take
just
me
like
to a
a little-
nice dinner.
Right.
Like, no, it doesn't have to be over the top. It's cool. You gave me a call, you thought about me, we're moving on.
I see. Nice.
That's the Pisces in me.
Well, on the flip side for
Yeah.
me, I feel like growing up, we never did any celebrations of sorts. Like even Christmas was, I mean, maybe my dad would go to my aunt's house 2 hours away from where we lived, and then we would have like gifts under the tree. But at our own personal home, we didn't have any of that. So when it came to like birthdays, these days, like Father's Day, whatever, none of that was really ever called out, or was I aware of it. I think it was just only in school. They'd be like, oh, it's Father's Day's coming up, create a card. Or Sunday school, they would make it a big deal and be like, well, it's Father's Day or Mother's Day. Here's like, go put a flower on, or like, here's a card. But then, I don't know, like, since my dad passed when I was young, I think like it kind of just stopped and there was no need for it. I think there was envy towards other kids that had parents who then would be like, nah, we're not going to release it. And I'm like, well, you have the luxury and I don't. And to me, it felt like, oh, wow, you're so taking it for granted. Because even if I wanted to, I couldn't, and I won't ever be able to do it that way. But then as I got older, I think like that's the young pettiness in me, right? It's like, oh my God, you're such a brat. You don't want to celebrate your parents that way? Like, I don't even have that one, right? But I think like as you get older, it is a commercialized thing. It's like the same thing as Valentine's Day. Why do you have to specifically choose that day to celebrate and appreciate? You could do it every day, right? And so I think like it's kind of changed and evolved over time where I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really matter as much. It's always a nice, if you don't remember it regularly, a nice moment to remember.
Do any emotions stir up current day? Like, for example, yesterday, thinking about Father's Day, what was that for you, knowing that your father passed, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think since it's been so long now that it doesn't, I don't think it hits me any different way, right? And I think maybe in the future, if I had my own kid or something, maybe it would mean something a little bit more. But for now, it doesn't feel that, like I don't feel too emotional. And I think time, I don't know. I don't know if time heals all, but time dampers all of those feelings. And so I don't have any feeling one way or another. Yeah.
What was your relationship with your father growing up?
Dude, I was daddy's little girl always in my mind. So now I don't know, like in actuality, was that the case or is that my imagination as a child? But in my mind, I was like daddy's little girl. I was obsessed. I was like, I'm gonna be like a hunter like him. I'm gonna go like fix up cars on the side. Like I'm gonna be riding the Corvette that my dad fixed up just for me, right? So when I hear our other friend who fixes his car, like this old car, and then fixes it up, I'm like, that would have been me in high school. Like I would have been the cool chick who's like rolling in a convertible Corvette down the street, right? Like while everyone else like who's spoiled would have gotten like brand new trucks or whatever, you know, like that they roll in and be like, no, I don't need that. I got like this Corvette. Do you see this? You know, like, and so I remember too, like in our garage, he had a Corvette actually in the back that was broken, that was like completely totaled, and it was his dream project. So when I think of like our friend that has a Supra who's been fixing it, it's like that was my dad's dream to fix up that Corvette to then one day give it to me. And so I think like there's that in my mind where I'm like, man, we're so close. I always loved hanging out. I would help. There's like this memory where we would, he would be always out fixing cars, right? And so after dinner, he'd be out there late at night with those like, you know, those handheld lamps. And then I would be bored, so I would come down and be like, oh, you know, whatever. And then he'd be like, do you want to help then if you're just going to, you know, dilly-dally around here? I was like, yeah, I'll help. So I remember getting into the car, and I'm only like maybe like 6, 7. I'd get into the driver's seat, and he has a car elevated and ramped up. He's like, all you need to do is gas the car, right? Because he wanted to see the motor run. So I'd gas it, and of course at one point, since I'm little, right, I can't really feel it. At one point, I hit the honk. He hits his head on the hood. So like, there's this like little memory. But in my mind, it was like funny. He was pissed, but but in my mind, like I remember that. I mean, it's all like the beautiful memories. Was he a very hard, rough around the edges? Yeah, absolutely. So there's those memories too. But I think, regardless, I always felt like I was daddy's little girl. So always like a solid relationship there.
Are you daddy's little boy, David?
I was literally just gonna say, I feel like I was daddy's little gay girl. I think now that I'm older, like I look back at who I was as a kid, or the recollections that I have of that period of my life, and I do think that I was always a little flamboyant. I think I look back and I'm like, some people have recently asked me what my favorite color is, and I go back and forth between blue and pink. And then pink just became one of those colors that I recently started having more appreciation for. But as a little kid, I wanted to be like, it's pink, you know. But my dad was just very traditional, you know. He's very machista, so there was a way of being a man, if you will. And to me, I was never going, at least in my head, even growing up, I don't think I was ever going to fulfill that dream for my father. And not in a bad sense, because for me, like, I kind of was always happy of being that little nerdy, flamboyant little kid. Like, I think I really appreciated it. The thing with my dad is that, I don't know, like, I want to have a lot of those memories of, like, playing with my dad, but I think a lot of the times it was like I was too afraid to go to my dad because I couldn't fulfill that manly, like, or, more masculine version of myself. And the only times that I recall my dad kind of being into, like, me having a relationship with my dad was when I was playing soccer. I grew up playing soccer. And, like, I really love soccer. Like, I lived for it. I did it every weekend for years. And I feel like that's the only time that I did have type of relationship with my dad, but similar to like what Ozzy was saying earlier with his dad for Father's Day and his dad being at work, my dad was working through a lot of my games, right? So I barely got to see him for that connection that I did have with him. Like I didn't get to share it that much because he was working or he was busy with something else.
Right.
But growing up, I think and even now, like as I'm 31 years of age now, I'm older. Even when we hug, which is uncomfortable at times, it's weird when him and I hug. I do feel like I'm that little gay guy that's hugging his dad. Like I really do look up to my dad. I think one of the things that my parents have never really understood because of culture, tradition, they think that I don't love them, but a lot of it is like, hey, like I really love you guys. There's been a lot of things that have happened in the trajectory of my relationship with my family that has impacted the way that we, deal with each other. But I love my parents. There's some of the people that I look up to the most. And I think I attribute a lot of who I am to this day to them, honestly. Like, being ambitious, wanting to be somebody in life. A lot of it comes from the examples that my parents gave me. And people like my dad, like he really did work hard. And, that was one of the things that I needed to learn over the years as I grew older, that my dad wasn't there because he didn't want to, because he was trying to work and give me a way of life.
Right.
So I came to terms with that aspect of it, but then the part that lacks between my dad and I is obviously the conversation of like me being gay,
Right.
and him not being okay with that.
At what age did you realize or felt like you weren't going to be the man your dad wanted you to be?
And this is funny because I was a sassy little kid, but like I always thought as a little kid I was like, I'm gonna be this badass bitch, but not the word bitch, but like I always aspired to be somebody. I always had dreams.
Right.
Like I was always like hoping that I would be someone. But in my head, it was never like that masculine man, like coming home and like having a family. In my head, I'm like, I want to go and do stuff with my life. I want to go and explore. I was so curious about life. But my dad was very like limited to like, this is how you have to see life. And for me, like, I didn't want to just, color inside the lines. I wanted to go all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that came with like me also learning that I was different, that I was gay, right? So, I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I have a similar experience in the sense of that my dad was always at work while growing up, and still to this day, he's pretty much always at work.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to, what I think is not as strong of a relationship with my father, just because if he's always at work, I wasn't really able to build that emotional bond with him. So I just felt like my dad is my dad because he's my dad. And he was the breadwinner of the family, and he had to be at work in order to sustain the family. And I get his role that he took on for the family to be that financial provider. So in that regard, I definitely appreciate his courage and being the brave man he is to be like, I'm going to step up and take care of my family. That's great. But there's a but, right? Like, but there lacks that emotional connection. And for me, emotional connections really go a long way. I feel like if there's not much of an emotional connection, that relationship just lacks and it's not fulfilling. And I guess that's what I'm working on current day, just trying to build that type of connection and calling my dad and just talking to him whenever we can talk, which is pretty often. I at least speak with my parents like at least 3 times a week. And I at least see them once a week. So, like the relationship is there. It's just growing into now a different phase, I guess, as an adult, to building that emotional connection with him specifically. Because my mom, she's just the most social person, and she was literally the housewife. She raised us. So it was easy for her to give us that emotional support. So each of them had such a different role, and my connection with them is so different. But my love for them is, I mean, it's the same. They're my parents.
Right.
What else are we thinking?
Did that silence awkward you out?
Just a little bit.
Really?
Just a little
I
bit.
feel like
mean,
it's like fine.
Right?
It's always normal for me.
No, I guess for me, I was just thinking, like, I was kind of, you saying that you know, your dad wasn't there, for different reasons, right? And for me, I feel like my father's been absent, not only emotionally, but, you know, sometimes physically as well. And you say the same about that. So it's interesting to hear that our experiences are different, but similar in the sense of, like, there are absences and there are things that we would want to experience with our fathers. And I think as I kind of take that conversation on from there, like, I think the frustration that I have with my father is that I still have the opportunity. Like, I think of, like, people in your situation who have just gone through it, for example, right?
Yeah.
So I always think of, like, what if my dad isn't there one day? Like,
Yeah.
how do I build that relationship? And so for me, it's always been about how do I make this relationship work with my parents, because I really want a relationship with my parents. I want to feel close to them. Like, I've always pressured even for them to accept me as I was, because I really wanted to be close to them and I wanted to share my life with them. So my frustration with my father comes from him essentially wasting on life at this point, where it's like, hey, like, life is short. My parents always tell me that, like, life is short, you're not gonna have us around that much longer, right? But I think that as I've gotten older and I see my difference is, like, right, life is short, therefore you guys should also make an effort to be a part of my
Like,
life.
come meet me halfway type
Right.
of thing. Yeah.
Right. That's how I feel about it. I feel like as we get older, like, again, I'm very appreciative of my parents and everything they've done. But I think that as I come to age and I come to be the age that they were, even when I was, like, at this point, I think I was 10 already with one of my parents. I want to be in a place where, you know, we're understanding, like, I'm understanding of all of that, but I just want to be able to move forward with the relationship. I want to be able to enjoy each other, have a family. I actually am craving that. It's just unfortunate that I can't have it because of differences with, like, sexuality, religion, tradition, where we come from. So for me, it's like, I envy when like, other people, like, when you said for you, it's not, like, you don't think about it, but for Father's Day, when I see all of the ads and everything, that actually stirs up a lot of emotion for me, because I'm like, I want to do that. Like, I want to, you know, be grilling with my dad, you know, carne asada, or
Right.
take him out to the restaurant. Like, I do crave for that relationship with my dad a lot, and it's unfortunate that we don't have it. And a lot of me, like, us not having it, I'm in a place where I'm healing and I'm moving forward with my life. But I would want my dad to be there. I would want to celebrate him. I do want to celebrate at least the little good memories that I have of him, which
Right.
are like, hey, like, you worked for your ass to, like, give me an opportunity at life, and I want to be able to celebrate that. So for now, like, I'm celebrating in distance, but I hope that one day, you know, I'm sure that there's growth on my side as well, that we can get to a point where we can enjoy each other in that relationship and bond that we have before it's too late, essentially.
Would it be difficult for you, like, regardless of Father's Day, right, to then hit him up or, like, go down and be like, you know, just you and I, let's go out for dinner, like, because I feel like that would be the closest step without putting the Father's Day title over it. It's just a random, like, let's just go out for food, and it's not boys' night or whatever, you know, like, it's just going, right? And I think I say this because, and I already know the difficulties towards it too, because I obviously have my mom, which our relationship had its turbulence, right? So if you were to ask me the same question, I'm like, bitch, yeah, I know, it's difficult. But I'm throwing it back to you because you have both parents, and,
Right.
you know, and I feel like, yes, it's been difficult, but it's been an ongoing difficult journey. So curious, like, would that be viable?
No, that would definitely be viable at this point. The only thing with that, like, I'm willing to go to, because I've done it before. I've gone to eat with both of them, actually, just where my siblings are there, nobody's there.
Right.
It's just us. And one of the last times that I did that with both of them, I remember because they had picked me up at the airport and we went to Norm's to eat. And while we were sitting there the entire time, it was quiet. Like, it was
Oh.
silent,
Oh,
right?
really?
And I hadn't felt that uncomfortable with, like, my family. And that was the first time I'm like, I guess it hit me that it was almost like my family and I were strangers. They didn't know who I was. They don't know, they don't know about me. And it's hard because I'm there wanting to build that relationship with them, but they don't want to ask the hard question of like, hey, how are you? Do you have a partner in your life? They want to avoid any question possible that's not going to involve my sexuality. So then it comes down to like, hey, how's work? And it's like, yeah, that's good. But once that conversation is done, it's like, there's not a lot of other conversations to have.
I see.
And that's where, like, for me, it becomes difficult. And I guess my pride does come in from time to time where I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go in and do that and just be sitting there silent,
Yeah.
How did your father take the news when you came out?
It was rough. I think it was, honestly, as I always feared coming out to my dad, I think because of, like, the machista culture. And
How old were you?
I was 20 when I came out to him. 20. And I was already living in college, so I think that's what also kind of gave me that.
The distance.
The-
You
yeah.
got like the distance
It gave
to
me
help.
the courage to, like,
And then you're like,
go and
yeah.
come out to him. So, like, and it wasn't even, I wasn't supposed to come out to him that day, actually.
What happened?
I had gone down to LA to an interview for work because I was interviewing for jobs. I think that was around the time that around the time that I had been done with college. So it's 21 when I came out to him. And I came home and then he started asking me about life, about I was kind of lost by the conversation initially because I wasn't understanding what he was saying, but ultimately I gathered that he was trying to ask me indirectly about my sex life or if I had somebody in my life, right? Because they had asked the question of like, well, are you gonna move back home with us, after college if you're moving back down to LA? And I said no, like, and then they were like, why not? And I'm like, I wasn't ready to like say that, but then I think he also gathered because I had already been out to my mom by that point.
I see.
So then he said something, and I finally, because I'm a very direct person, I said, are you referring to me being gay? It just kind of came out, and he freaked out. Like, his first instinct was to be very aggressive and very ashamed of, if you will, of like me, or it was a really tough conversation. So I remember leaving that conversation and I was like, my emotions towards my dad were very negative. Like, I'm never gonna have a relationship with my dad after this. Like, he's not my dad. But I think a lot of that hurt because you expect that love from that person in your life, right? Like, you're if there's nobody else in this world like that you can go to, like, those are normally the people that you go to.
Yeah.
Like, hey, my friend sucks, or
Right.
my girlfriend, my boyfriends, like, it doesn't matter. Like, those are the people you eventually go to. So it was a difficult scenario or situation for me to be in, to hear from my dad that he was ashamed of me. And it's been 12 years since I came out. The relationship's gotten a little better, but I mean, a lot of it is that we haven't really ever closed that gap or that conversation of like, this is who I am, and this is who I'm always gonna be, right? Like,
Right.
it's not gonna change.
Yeah.
And all I can do is live my life. That's kind of where I am at. Like, I'm living my life, and I know who I am, and I think that's the most important thing, to know who you are, who you love, and then hopefully that relationship ends up,
Yeah. It's a work in progress for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a huge fear, especially like machista culture.
Yeah.
And then religion comes into play, and it's just so complex. My question for you, Ella, when you asked me about what my perspective would be if I were to be a father and my kids not wanting to celebrate or like whatever, how they would want to celebrate me on Father's Day. Right now, I just got a thought of like thinking about your experience of a single mother, right? And how your mother, in a sense, had to take a double role of a mother plus father.
Yeah.
How would you describe your experience of your mother taking both roles?
I think that it is a tough job, and I think to a certain degree, I ended up taking a little bit on both sides. So being the oldest in the family, I think indirectly you have more responsibility, more ownership. So when I hear stories of like kids in their younger years, they're like, oh my God, we used to go to the movies after school, like we did blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, dude, like I was doing, like I felt like I was acting like an adult at like 10. And so any like letters that came, I would have to figure it out. I knew how to write a checkbook at 10. I knew, like, there was no Google Maps at all, right?
Oh my God, yeah, MapQuest.
Right, there was MapQuest, but then we didn't even have a proper computer and printer.
Yeah.
So we had a backup, those paper maps.
Yeah.
I knew how to maneuver the paper map.
That is intense.
Yeah.
Like,
she had a whole compass with her.
I was like my mom would be like, and she's not a good driver, and she'd be like driving around, and all we're trying to do is go find like the local school that I'm supposed to go to, right? Just to see.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, oh no, we and I would say the wrong turn, and it was more for me to find orientation of where, and she'd just be like, oh my God, like what are you doing, like we're constantly circling. I was like, no, trust me, like this is the way. So when I think about all of that, like I think to a certain degree I took on a little bit more from that parental side of the house. Not to like downplay my mom's role playing both, because she did regardless, right? She had a full-time job, she was taking multiple jobs, she picked us up, I mean the whole thing, right? And then wherever she couldn't fill it up, I would just go in and do it for myself type of situation. I think it's not an easy task for sure. And so now that she's like retired and just going through the motions, I think she has her own traumatic experiences herself. And so when I say like our relationship has been turbulent, it's because I think she herself is coping through a lot. She did not get the right support through all of that. I mean, her way of coping was like just leaving, right? So when my dad passed in Kansas, literally funeral was done, next day the house was sold, next day we were out. Wow. Then we've never gone back. And so when I think through that and how she's handled it, she was on the run with 2 kids, and then like as we're now slowly branching off, now you spiral because you're like, what the, like I think there's a lot of things that are happening. Then you hear, okay, like now we both have partners, and then you see these it's even more, right? Like, oh, but that's not what I wanted, or whatever. And then it feels like a lot. And I think though, as I have conversations with her, she's like coming to terms with it. There's thankfully YouTube and all of these things, so she constantly watches it, and then it gives her, it's like this self-therapy that she's created for herself. And I think that's kind of helped. And when we talk now, it's a lot more reasonable. Like before, she would never even message like, I love you. I'd be like, like, oh my, and I had roommates all the time. So I would overhear the conversations about how the parents are talking. Mom's always loving, Carrie, like, I love you, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, what the heck? I've never heard that ever in my life. Or like when the parents would visit for college, or the roommates over, like they're so loving. And I'm like, what the heck? My mom's just like, okay, goodbye. They just leave. She just leaves, right? And I think to a certain degree, it's like her coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms of like, I don't want to be emotional, and I don't want her to be emotional, which I do lean that way, Pisces side, right? Yeah. And so like,
that's why we're all friends.
I know. When it comes to Kevin and his family though, like we're like leaving, and I'm like, okay, goodbye, get away, go, right? And he'd be like, why are you not like embracing your emotions? Like, you're sad, so why don't you just and I'm like, I don't want to. Go away. Go. And I will figure it out. Or like I immediately, if like I can't help myself, there's this like attachment. And so I literally will like, as soon as they leave, I feel this emptiness. And then I'd be like, let me go clean. Let me go do this. All right, I'm going to go to the gym. Like I literally keep myself busy because I don't want to feel any of them. But then on the flip side, I think most people do.
What if you allow yourself to feel?
I just think I'm feeling sad, and I don't like that feeling of sensation of sadness.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where do you think that comes from, though? That sadness?
I think it comes from my dad, probably. Yeah. Because I think it's like you felt that void, Now I'm getting emotional for the first time on this podcast. Oh my God. Yeah, I think it comes a lot from that. Like, I feel very sad. Like, I don't know I'm sure there's like an inherent like, oh, if you say goodbye, is that a goodbye today, or is that a goodbye for life, forever? You know? So I think there's a little bit of that.
You for sure need to let yourself feel, I feel like.
Yeah. But then that means I'd be emotional like this every single time.
That's okay. Cry it out.
I'm going to tell you something that recently happened that I can relate to. I actually told Ozzy about this experience recently. So in the last year and a half, I've started to date someone. You know, we've been together for a year and a half now. And recently, we started going to like family parties. And
Right.
I've started to get to know the family a little bit more. And one of the first times that I got to encounter his entire family all at once, and you guys know me, I'm super introverted, so I'm freaking out. Like, I'm sweating, like, I'm freaking out.
How many
like,
shots did you take before?
I had to drink. Maybe an edible was popped, who knows? But essentially, we went through the whole bang, and it was fun. Like, I had tons of fun. They were very accepting, very loving. So it was time to come back home. And on the way back home, I broke down crying.
Aww.
Like, I was literally sobbing. Like, I literally watched one of those Grey's Anatomy episodes. Like, literally sobbing.
Aww.
And, you know, Jeremy at the time asked, he's like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, he was freaking out because he thought maybe it was too much. He's like, oh my God, was me
Like,
and my
did they
family.
say
like,
something
was that
to
too
you?
much, right?
What'd they do?
And for me, it was like, I literally said, I'm crying because I'm happy. Like, I hadn't felt that sense of like happiness like that in such a long time, and especially with a person that makes me feel safe, and then to not only have that but have his family like take me in, like that for me was like an explosion of emotions, and I didn't know what else to do except for literally just break down and cry. Because I'm like, I guess for me, I had never felt like, I felt like I've been missing that, and like I hadn't even almost felt it. And it's scary to feel, because I get what you say. It's like almost like when you are willing, you're ready to let go and fall into that entire emotion. You're like, whoa, what if that is not there tomorrow, right? Like, what if it's gone or something doesn't work out? And that, like, that makes me scared, and I hold back because of that fear of like,
interesting.
I'm like, I don't want, like, if I let myself entirely go, I know how I am. Like, I'm gonna love hard.
Yeah.
And then if it's not there after that, like, I'm afraid to like experience that and be like, fuck that, you know, sorry with my French, but you know, damn, like I don't want to go through life not having that if I'm starting to have it, you know, so I get scared of that.
Yeah.
Love.
That sounds like another topic for another time.
So are we feeling shaken? Stirred? David, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling stirred. Definitely feeling a stir of emotions. Yeah, a chance to kind of look back, especially as, you know, Father's Day was just yesterday, to just look back at, you know, that relationship. Getting all those feelings. Those feelings I feel like are always going to be stirred for me, and hopefully at one point or another, you know, they get better, but this conversation has definitely got me stirred.
Ella?
I mean, I feel clearly lots of emotions in today's topic. I'm going to say I'm a little shaken. I think what you just ended with, David, too, like components of that I relate to. Because I think when you have two families, you start to have, well, easily two things to compare it to. So I feel what you feel, meaning like, man, it's a 180 from this side to the other side with my partner's family. And it's like this feeling of, like overwhelming like acceptance or like appreciation of who you are and blah blah blah, right? So I think overall I just feel a little shaken around the entire conversation. What about you?
Me? I'm a little shaken. And what shakes me a little bit is the thought of Mother's Day. Not because of my relationship with my mother, but because of the question you asked at the start of the podcast, saying like, what expectation should I have on my kids when they celebrate Father's Day? My thought goes to like, well, what's gonna happen on Mother's Day when they don't have an actual, I guess, a woman figure, right? Like, my thought is, as a man, and assuming my partner's always still gonna be another dad, right? These kids are gonna have two dads,
right?
And if we have a girl, I'm just scared that I'm just glad I have girlfriends, like a significant amount of girlfriends, because I how am I supposed to talk about their time of month or like things women experience when they go through puberty? Because I can't
relay that.
relate to it. I can't really share the experience. So that's why I'm feeling a little shaken. I'm like, what's going to happen on Mother's Day? Sure, we'll celebrate it because I feel like I have a great balance between femininity and masculinity. And sure, it's just another day that you celebrate. But my thoughts is like, what is the experience of that kid at that point, not actually celebrating Mother's Day per se? Like, is that going to matter to them? Is it not?
Right.
Like, it's just something that I don't know. I'm sure if the opportunity does even come up, I'll approach it then. But it just made me think down the line.
Think more.
Well,
Well,
all right, beautiful people. Clearly, we all have a different experience. I hope you maybe feel a little shaken, a little stirred. See you next time.
All right, bye.
Bye.